Hello guys, welcome back to another video today. I know it's been a crazy heck of a long time since I've even made a video. That's because of school, but now I'm on Thanksgiving break, so I have a bit of time to, make some more videos. I'm gonna be continuing the logic series because I really want to emphasize that series, especially when we get into material logic. And, but today, we are going to look at John of St. Thomas's book again, Outlines of Formal Logic, and we're going to look at the definition of a term, and I'm going to try my best to explain what he says in here. So let's go. Okay. As obvious, there are many views, or as with anything at all, there's many views to as what a term exactly is. Some think that it's just a part that makes up a sentence in any matter, right? Like for example, when I say John is cool, cool is a term. John is also a term, or whatever. And some people think that it is a principal part and as a term only. And some view it as something that really concludes the resolution of a proposition or kind of breaks down or what a proposition breaks down into, or a syllogism. And others see it as a predicate or a subject. Like for example, if I say this tree is green, the tree is the subject, green is the predicate. However, all of these views are true in a sense, right? They all describe what a term is, but we need to when we define things, we need to look at what necessarily pertains more to the nature or essence. So that is what John of St. Thomas is going to look into here. Now, first of all, our mind proceeds by resolution. That is dissolving, as in moving from the easy to the harder. That's what Aristotle even said when he solved Meno's paradox. Right? And so we move from the more simple to the more complex. We move from the more easy to the more hard stuff in the sciences, and especially in logic. This is also called analytics by Aristotle because it breaks down into elements. Remember, watch my video on brief textbook on mental logic where we discuss those type of things. Therefore, there has to be a final element or term in this resolution, or that is in this dissolving, beyond which no further resolution by art is possible, much like how prime matter, right, and prime matter is a metaphysical substrate in scholastic metaphysics. It serves as really the ultimate principle of resolution in natural generation, that is for prime matter. But we need an ultimate term. If this was not the case, the process would go on ad infinitum, and there would be no knowledge, nor would there be any perfect resolution. And because the term of resolution is the same as the principle of composition, the ultimate element, that is the simplest term into which logical composites are resolved, will also be considered the first element from which the rest are assembled. So there are first terms, basically. And so we focus on the term as the ultimate element, where every logical resolution ends, as it serves as the simplest and primary starting point. Now, if you just read that and you just like this blew over your head, don't worry, that's totally fine. I'll try my best to explain it. But basically, what John of St. Thomas is saying is that all resolution begins with the term. Why? Because remember, if you watch the first video of my logic series, we discussed the basic three acts of the intellect in formal logic. First, we have simple apprehension. Second, we have judgment. The third, we have a syllogism. We have to start off with simple apprehension, which produces a term. It creates an intellectual image, a species, right? And so this is really the beginning. This is the ultimate starting point. Oh, sorry, I don't know why it's just doing that. Okay, there it is. Now Aristotle defined a term as what a proposition is resolved into. That is, it breaks down into. So a predicate and a subject, right? A proposition affirms or denies something, right? It's either true or false. So, for example, if I say Aristotle is a terrible philosopher, Aristotle is my subject. As I've said, terrible philosopher is a predicate. However, Aristotle there and then, he didn't really fully define what a term is, but rather he just defined it as a part of a syllogism here, right? But you got to note different books. Aristotle defines stuff differently. Now, a syllogism, as I've said, right, we talked about before, is a unique argument consists of three unique terms, a major, minor, and a middle term, as they are the extremes of a proposition, that is the major and the minor, and they have an inferential role in a syllogism. That's correct, because obviously, right, because how the middle term and how the major and the minor work out is going to determine the mood of that syllogism and its figure. But other times, Aristotle considered the term more universally as being common to noun and verb. That is, the terms are either noun and verb or adverb, right? Instead of term, Aristotle used expression, where it refers to forming an enunciation and not the inferential part of a syllogistic. An enunciation really just means declaration. Sometimes it's synonymous with proposition, so just note that. St. Thomas Aquinas, however, says that the noun and the verb are only expressions. And he says, explaining Aristotle, and it seems from his manner of speaking that he used this name for signifying the parts of an enunciation, that is, a declaration or a proposition, a sentence, right? Aristotle and St. Thomas view the parts of a declaration or enunciation as expressions, which we call terms. These are the final elements in logical resolution via the first act of the intellect. As I've said, remember, apprehension, right? Simple apprehension. When the mind apprehends something, it forms an intellectual image, produces the term. St. Thomas also calls the terms the parts of an enunciation, so we define them as such, right? Because John of St. Thomas is a Thomist. And as I said, I put the enunciation. A complete statement that affirms or denies something of something. But that's also kind of a cheesy, kind of like a tight definition, because it also can mean declaration or a sentence. So just please note that. Alright, so definition of the term. The term or the expression can be defined through something more common than just being either the subject or a predicate. So, for example, that from which a simple proposition is made. That is the definition of a term, right? Aristotle defined the verb, noun, and sentence as being sounds. But really, a term is a sound significant by convention, and significant by convention is relating to what the people define it as, right? Like what practical means, right? From which a simple proposition or sentence is made. However, if you're talking about a mental or a written term, because terms are also the symbols or the representations of the experiences of the soul, as if you read Peri Herminias or On Interpretation, it's a sign from which a simple proposition is made. John says that it's called significant or a sound because we're excluding nonsensical stuff, like stuff that don't even make up a full word. Like, for example, if I say difficult, like if I say, let's see a cool word, cool, and I say ooh, like, that doesn't even make sense, right? Because this doesn't signify anything, right? And that's also to erase stuff like grr or like a groan. You know, a groan isn't really significant, right? Although you can call it a sign, right? Because remember, John of St. Thomas defines, oh, well, we haven't gone to that, but a sign is something that represents something else other than itself to a cognitive power. Okay, every term is either a noun that describes a person, place, or thing, 2, a verb, an action, right? And 3, an adverb. If you don't know what an adverb is basically the quality of a verb. For example, if I say slow killing, right? To kill is a verb, and slow killing is an adverb. You're describing it because you're saying slow. Quickly killing, right? Okay. A term has to be significant. Otherwise, a non-significant term is a contradiction. That doesn't even make sense, right? It should be noted by what we mean by significant by convention. As I've said, it means to exclude sounds that are like groans or moans because they're not really significant, right? Okay, and so the saying from which a proposition is made is meant to exclude the sentence or proposition as being a definition of the term, even though that's kind of already obvious, right? And some words or concepts don't directly make up a statement on their own. Sometimes they can be thought of as part of a statement, but only in a kind of imaginary or hypothetical way. But obviously there and then we're going to look at this later. And yeah, that's another video. So yeah, basically that's it, guys. Sorry for a short video. Thanks for watching. Next video we'll talk about something more special in material logic.